Season 9 of the ABB FIA Formula E World Championship is complete. A new world champion driver and team have been crowned, but how did we get there? Time to unpack the story of Formula E's most eventful season yet.
All 5 lights are on, and we go green in Mexico City.
Mexico City and a packed-out Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez hosted the season opener and the race debut of the Gen 3 era. And there was a huge question mark over how things would play out. The first qualifying groups and duels of the season soon showed us that pre-season testing wouldn't be anything to go by, as none of the top 4 fastest drivers in Valencia qualified in the top 10.
Neither DS Penske advanced through to the duels.
Instead, it was Lucas di Grassi with the Julius Baer pole position, beating Jake Dennis to the top spot.
Thank you, Nicky. Yeah, although I really didn't expect to be here today, especially with Jake. I think he was pretty quick.
And an impressive first running for the McLaren rookie Jake Hughes, starting on the second row.
And the benchmark time that Hughes sets is a 12.788. That's a rapid lap from Jake Hughes.
The first race of the season showcased how many would need a few more races to get up to speed with the Gen 3 cars and build the confidence needed to push their limits.
Just lost the rear.
It didn't take long to see the early dominance of the Porsche powertrain come to light, after Jake Dennis crossed the line getting the first win of the season and Pascal Wehrlein climbing up 4 places to finish second. Lucas di Grassi gave us another impressive display in Mexico, pole position and a 3rd place finish. An encouraging start, but something that neither di Grassi nor the team would be able to replicate for the rest of the season. The scene had been set for this new era of electric racing, but little did we know the drama that was awaiting us. Two eventful races under the lights in Diriyah did not disappoint. The action from start to finish showcased the challenges of driving the new Gen 3 car, as well as the now season-defining difference in one-lap qualifying pace versus race efficiency. Impressive back-to-back wins for Porsche and Pascal Wehrlein in the doubleheader in the desert from 9th and 5th on the grid, further proving Pascal's talents and the race package he had at his disposal. A huge points haul and straight to the top of the standings, but Dennis did everything he could to minimise that lead with 2 second-place finishes, one of which from 11th on the grid, again demonstrating the efficiency in the Porsche powertrain being a step above the rest of the grid. But would it stay that way, as Formula E headed to the first new circuit of the season in India? Our first of 4 new locations in Season 9 as Formula E headed to Hyderabad. It was Mitch Evans on pole position, and despite tricky track conditions, it looked as if a Jaguar podium or better was on the cards. Until this happened.
Hey, Sam Bird! The 2 Jaguars collide! Bird hits Evans! Both tumbling down the order! And Sam Bird is going to be out of the Hyderabad E-Prix.
The coming together of the 2 Jaguars ended theirs and others' races and brought out the safety car, turning what was expected to be an energy-hungry circuit into an opportunity for those with less competitive machinery, Jean-Eric Vergne being one of them.
Jean-Eric Vergne to the inside of Sebastian Buemi.
Vergne claimed the win in Hyderabad after a jaw-dropping battle and defensive driving masterclass against Nick Cassidy in the Envision behind.
One of the most remarkable Formula E races in a long time!
Who had himself battled up to P2 from 9th on the grid, an example of what was to come from the Kiwi driver. Not an easy win at all for Vergne, who had to maximise every milliwatt of remaining energy, not just to stay in the lead, but to even finish the race. The main headline from Hyderabad, however, being the huge blow for the Jaguar TCS racing team. In the end, it was just Nick Cassidy of the Jaguar-powered drivers on the podium, when it could have been a very different story. And in terms of Mitch Evans' title hopes, could this have marked a decisive moment behind Evans' eventual championship finishing position? Completing the podium in Hyderabad and his first for Porsche was Season 6 champion Antonio Felix da Costa. A mega drive to battle up the field from 13th and onto the podium to secure great points for Porsche, alongside Wehrlein in 4th, who left Hyderabad still top of the standings, increasing the gap ahead of closest rival Jake Dennis, who finished outside of the points. Dennis got caught up in some good old-fashioned Formula E unpredictability, the risk that comes with having to rely on race efficiency to make up for undesirable qualifying performances, a prominent theme in the first half of the season.
Oh, Rast into the back of Dennis. Dennis is hit and damaged from this crash.
Another new location for Formula E was up next in Cape Town, South Africa, and a race that will undoubtedly go down in the history books as one of Formula E's greatest. 5 different race leaders, one of the greatest overtaking moves for the lead we've ever seen, and qualifying drama that meant 5 cars didn't even start the race. The Cape Town E-Prix was an emotional roller coaster. Rookie Sasha Fenestraz claimed the Julius Baer pole position after the first of a few record-breaking performances as the Gen 3 car delivered on its speed credentials and the fastest average speed over a lap in Formula E history.
Oh yeah, baby.
But for the 8th race in a row, the driver on pole did not win the race, or even score any points in this case. It was a repeat of the podium from Hyderabad as consistency conquered, just in a different order. This might not seem that unusual, but it was. Believe it or not, this was the first time in Formula E that the same 3 drivers had been on back-to-back podiums, ever. It was Porsche driver Antonio Felix da Costa on the top step though, his first win for the team after firing his way up the field from 11th. A huge result for him and Porsche, who left Cape Town 42 points ahead in the team standings, the largest gap after 5 races held by any team in the championship's history. But at the top of the driver's standings, the 2 leading protagonists, Wehrlein and Dennis, both left Cape Town empty-handed thanks to collisions and penalties. Nick Cassidy was closing in, and the Jaguar-powered cars were matching the early Porsche-powered performance. Was a change in the championship narrative on the horizon? Formula E's first race in Brazil on the streets of São Paulo was a turning point for the story of the championship. Once again, the qualifying performance woes of the 2 championship leaders left them both starting from outside of the top 10, meaning there was ample opportunity for others to capitalise, namely the likes of Cassidy and the Jaguar pairing. Former champion Van Dorn lined up on pole with da Costa filling the front row. But given the lengths and speeds of the straights on this circuit, this would be an energy-hungry race that would make it very difficult to hold on to a lead. Not ideal for those struggling with race efficiency like Van Dorn, but an open door for others with strong race pace who could sit behind and save energy before pouncing. This made way for more of the peloton style of racing we'd been seeing across the season so far, before lots of close battling towards the end of the race, but none closer than that for the podium spots. A neck-and-neck finish in Mitch Evans' favour saw his and Jaguar's first win of the season, on what was an all-Jaguar powered podium. A huge moment in the championship narrative that would now see not just Cassidy, but Evans too stake their claim on the title. Next up was a doubleheader at the all-familiar venue of Tempelhof in Berlin. But despite this circuit being the most raced on in Formula E, no one could predict the type of races that would follow. Spins, slides, shunts and saves, Gen 3 racing in Berlin had it all. But it was Mitch Evans that would take the glory in round 7 despite starting this race 9th on the grid. superb climbing and energy management to score back-to-back wins. Made even better for Jaguar by his teammate Sam Bird helping to secure Jaguar's first 1-2 in the Gen 3 era. Concern grew for Jake Dennis watching on though after 4 races in a row without scoring points, and those around him tightening their grip on the championship. A big turnaround would be essential in the race just 24 hours later to keep the Avalanche Andretti drivers' dream alive. Qualifying in round 8 brought with it the first wet running of the Gen 3 car since its debut, making way for a surprise duo to show how a long-term cross-championship relationship with a race team can have its benefits.
Absolutely sailed through turn 9, Robin Freitz. He drives towards the line. Are we on for an apt front row lockout? We are!
An apt Cupra front row lockout left the paddock in awe as they masterfully made their way through the wet qualifying duels and onto the front row. Normal service resumed in the race, however, once the track had dried up. And by normal service, I mean the energy management strategy tightrope and chaos of Formula E racing. At the end of the race, it was Nick Cassidy who took the win after an incredible performance, climbing up from 8th on the grid to leave Berlin just 4 points behind championship leader Pascal Wehrlein. Crucially for his championship hopes, Jake Dennis returned to the podium for the first time in 5 races. Little did we know that this would mark the beginning of one of the most incredible, record-breaking title fights this sport has ever seen. Going into any race weekend in Monaco, the hype is real. One of, if not the world's most famous race circuits, tied with the half a season of drama we'd already experienced, this was a match made in heaven. And a race that would go down in the history books. All eyes were on qualifying being decisive for success in the race, as they often are in Monaco. But what followed, nobody expected. A phenomenal session for the 2 rookies this season, Hughes and Fenestraz, starting the race on the front row. Testament to the season they were having, surpassing expectations despite their lack of experience racing in Formula E. Qualifying may be crucial in Monaco for other categories, but when you have a field like we do in Formula E and a car built for street racing, you learn to expect the unexpected. And going into this race, the 4 main championship contenders were starting in 6th, 9th, 11th and 12th. Cue the drama. Despite the energy management chaos during the race, this podium trio was set in motion from as early as the end of the 5th lap. Dennis having climbed up from 11th to 7th in the first few laps to sit behind championship rival Evans, with his other championship rival Cassidy behind in 8th. Their energy management strategies had to be flawless to maintain the pace with their closest rivals and avoid any trouble, whilst making their way up to podium positions. Now it's this combination of excellent driving, team strategy and keeping out of trouble that made the podium possible and would go on to decide the fight for the World Championship title. Returning to hot and humid Indonesia for the second time, there were only 14 points between 2nd and 5th in the standings. Cassidy led the championship after winning in Monaco. Pascal needed Jakarta to go well to keep his title fight alive, as consistency and form in the previous races was not on his side. Starting on the 2nd row and his best qualifying of the season, there was only Dennis ahead, and Wehrlein was crucially ahead of then championship leader Nick Cassidy, and 2 of the others in the top 5. Keeping things this way, or even better, would rejuvenate Wehrlein's championship hopes. After qualifying, the fastest man in Jakarta was Max Günther, quickest in all sessions and then secured pole position. But would the pole sitter's curse continue, or could we finally see the driver on pole also go on to win the race? Or was destiny written for Pascal Wehrlein to regain his championship lead and get his season back on track? Pascal's impressive race management and win reignited his championship hopes and closed the gap on Cassidy, and Jake Dennis's podium, his third in a row, gave us another glimpse of the Porsche-powered success from earlier in the season. Cassidy's rare blip in performance added even more drama to the championship fights, and the second coming together of the two Jaguars served another potential blow to Evans' championship. It was the second podium of the season for Günther and Maserati, and an impressive points conversion from pole by a team who had struggled earlier in the season. But would the second race of the doubleheader in Jakarta tell the same story? Rinse and repeat for Maximilian Günther. Another pole position, but could he convert this one into a race win and finally break the pole sitter's curse? Back-to-back front row starts for Dennis, as well as he proved his qualifying woes were a thing of the past. Great momentum going into a race he'd scored a podium at just the day before. Not a great start, however, to the second day for championship leaders Cassidy and Wehrlein, both qualifying outside of the top 5 on a circuit where leading from the front and converting was way more possible than previous circuits. The pole sitter's curse was broken, and a phenomenal drive from Maserati's Maximilian Günther to secure the brand's first single-seater World Championship win in 65 years. The quickest in all-time sessions and the undisputed king of Jakarta. Consistency, however, had a new name, and it was Jake Dennis. 4 podiums in a row in an optimal time of the season, outscoring his closest rivals, including the driver that shares the same powertrain. As for the leaderboard, there was just a single point separating the top 2, Wehrlein and Dennis, after the Jakarta weekend, as Dennis put the pressure on Pascal, with tension mounting between them both on and off the track. Nick Cassidy was only 5 points behind that, having dropped out of the lead after 2 races to forget, and Mitch Evans bounced back from the disappointing race then just the day before to close the gap behind Cassidy as the championship fight continued. The last of the new destinations this season as we headed to the northwest of the US and a track that's been home to the likes of IndyCar in Portland, Oregon. Thanks to the nature of the layout with high-speed corners and long straights, it didn't take long for records to be broken by the Gen3 car in Portland. Qualifying made way for more Dennis' great performance, securing his and the Avalanche Andretti team's first pole of the season.
Yes.
An excellent showing for Nissan also, with rookie Fenestraz, another impressive qualifying session, made even better for the Japanese manufacturer with Norman Nato starting on the second row. However, given the high-speed nature and energy management required at this circuit, staying in the lead would be no easy task. And what followed was one of the most strategic and drama-filled races of the season. Nick Cassidy's win from 10th on the grid was the perfect way to bounce back from the disappointment of Jakarta. Another incredible climb up the order and energy management masterclass. A 5th podium in a row for Dennis, who did well to hold on to a podium spot in a race where leading and maintaining a top position required a seamless strategy and execution, further showcasing the dominance of the Porsche and Jaguar powered cars this season with some incredible grid climbing. Da Costa finishing 3rd from 7th, Evans finishing 4th from 20th, and Buemi closing out the top 5 having started 16th. Unmatched performance from these two powertrains this season. The battle continued, and next up was a driver favourite and double header in Rome. Mitch Evans and Jaguar TCS Racing continued their reign in Rome in the first day of the doubleheader. Superb qualifying to secure Evans' pole, and teammate Bird lined up beside him on the front row. But an incident-filled race would cause havoc for much of the grid and add further drama to the fight for the championship. After the first race in Rome, Mitch Evans' day of dominance with pole, win and fastest lap reinforced that despite the form of others, he was still in the championship fight and would take it down to the wire. Nick Cassidy's performance, another monumental grid climb from 9th to 2nd and podium, further cemented his claim on the title and envisions on the team's championship. Maximilian Günther completed the podium of the incredibly dramatic race, making it a third podium of the season for him, and a strong case for why Maserati should renew his contract for the following season. At this point in the season, the cars and the drivers that looked poised for title contention were pretty evenly matched. Qualifying pace and race performance were seemingly on a level playing field between the likes of Dennis, Cassidy and Evans, as Wehrlein's case for the title had started to weaken. So for the second round in Rome, qualifying would have more weight, as would keeping out of trouble during the race. Jake Dennis was on pole after a shootout with his primary championship rival in the final of the qualifying duels, and Mitch Evans started on the second row. But as always in Formula E, drama was just around the corner.
Oh, Mitch Evans! The two title protagonists collide!
A lights to flag victory for Jake Dennis and a grand slam of points for pole position, race win and the fastest lap. Exactly what you would need going into the final weekend. All of this made even sweeter by the fact that his two main championship rivals finished outside of the points or didn't finish at all. Norman Nato scored Nissan their first podium as a manufacturer entry and his first this season, a decent points haul to help their case in the team's championship. Sam Bird rounding out the podium, doing the same for Jaguar's team title hopes against Envision in the lead. A doubleheader in London was all that was left to crown the drivers and teams world champions, and it was Jake Dennis's title to lose. Going into London, all eyes were on Dennis, who had the ability to win the title on Saturday if Cassidy ran into any trouble. Mitch Evans needed every point available to keep the battle going into the final race on Sunday. The stakes were set, everyone knew what they had to do, and qualifying provided more than enough to keep things interesting.
Evans takes pole position. He'll drop 5 places due to the penalty in Rome.
Outscoring Cassidy by 6 points and not being outscored by Evans by more than 15 would seal the deal for the British driver to win the championship on home soil.
I owe Mitch a bit, mate.
However, Dennis was in a position of complete isolation, surrounded by drivers and teams that were all working against him. And in front of a sold-out crowd, there were just 36 laps between Dennis and the potential world title. 15 laps in, and Envision were primed for simple team orders to maximise Cassidy's points and keep the title fight alive.
Cassidy's front wing's broken.
The devastating miscommunication cost Cassidy a shot at the title.
It's over! Oh, Nick Cassidy! What were Envision doing?
All Dennis had to do was finish on the podium. He soon found himself joined by the two Porsche drivers with an agreement supposedly made to help Dennis in the customer team. But for whatever reason, this didn't go to plan.
This is a joke. He just tried to buy me the wall.
More drama and a red flag brought the race to a standstill with 4 laps to go, before a second red flag with just 1 lap between Dennis and a world championship.
I think it's fairly clear that the Porsche guys aren't really working with him.
A new world champion crowned on home soil for the first time in the championship's history. And adding to his own record of podiums in a season, nobody could stop the Jake Dennis freight train. Not even Evans with a race win. He did everything asked of him all day, despite starting 6th with a grid penalty. Gutting for Nick Cassidy, of course, as well, but the team's championship wasn't wrapped up yet, and would go into the final race of the season with the top 2 teams level on points. Every point mattered in the battle for the team's championship, and it was manufacturer versus customer team for the title and the final spot on the team's podium. Equal on points going into qualifying, which of the Jaguar and Envision teams would draw first blood? It was advantage Envision as Cassidy bounced back from the disappointment of the day before to maximise the final day of the season. But with the heavens opening between qualifying and the race and conditions being exceptionally challenging to drive in, could Cassidy do what was needed to bring the team the glory he missed out on? His fourth win of the season sealed the deal for Envision to be crowned team's champions, and in the season-long battle of customer versus manufacturer, it was both the customers of Envision and Avalanche Andretti that got the victory over their manufacturers, bringing Formula E's most competitive, most action-packed, and most intense season to a close with a new World Championship winning driver and team. 16 races on 5 continents, the debut season of the Gen 3 car did not disappoint. And now the countdown begins to Season 10 of the ABB FIA Formula E World Championship.